Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting... Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another exciting, video. This is a different mic test, so I'm going to be using different audio, but hopefully it all works out somehow. I have no idea how. So, this rant video is from, thanks to the suggestion from Potent Sativa. Can you rant about how SAO and rezero influenced isekai and shousetsu? The answer is, kind of really hasn't on a narrative basis. In terms of a general, production basis, it might have. And so what do I mean by that? If anybody is unfamiliar, shousetsu just refers to shousetsu ga ni naru, let's become a novelist, which is the site that a lot of these stories are coming from. But I'm assuming if you're already on my second channel, you already know this. So, don't have to worry too much about that. So one of the things that's really important is that a lot of the stuff that we consider to be elements of isekai, the sort of like otherworld, gamey, oftentimes strong characters, all that kind of stuff, has already been codified before SAO. And I mean SAO as in the SAO anime. So it's already been around there, and it's already been on stuff like shousetsu. SAO never really implemented anything narrative-wide that made it particularly popular, or made it particularly that innovative. However, one of the things that's really important in regards to SAO is that it did seem to, this is very speculative, but it did seem to lead to an explosion on some levels of a lot of sort of isekai works, primarily because of the anime. Now, the reason why I say it's speculative is because for the most part, it's actually quite difficult to verify something like that. And there's a few reasons why. 1. It's very important to note that authors themselves are not always the arbitrators of historical truths because they're not necessarily very clear exactly about what's going on in a broad level, especially since that a lot of them still kind of stick to specific groups and subcultures. 2. One of the things that's really important when we're talking about this sort of way about thinking the history of isekai is that we oftentimes kind of miss about a lot of the history of like other isekai that are developing or have been developed, but may not actually have had influence with the sort of mainstream stuff that we're seeing so far. One of the big ones coming to mind is Otome game isekai, which has its own kind of like interesting history associated with it and kind of talks about a lot of other stuff as well. 3. Even though these particular stories might not themselves be drawing directly from SAO, in terms of its narrative, they are drawing from something, and they're kind of often unclear about exactly what it is they draw from. Now, given there are stories that they do draw from, and sometimes they do explain which authors they come from, but oftentimes it's kind of a mishmash of things. And remember, this can be very heavily edited or very heavily changed when things go from a web novel series into a light novel series. For example, when a story gets picked up like by, say, Alpha Polis, or Enterbrain, as in the case of Overlord, there can be significant changes that functionally muddy up the end result in sort of any sense of like historical trajectory. ReZero is kind of in the same boat. ReZero doesn't really sort of codify or innovate or sort of really change anything in particular in regards to isekai tropes. Arguably, according to Damien, so this is a little bit offhand here, but according to Damien, it does seem like ReZero did at the very least popularize the idea or made the idea that isekai can be turned into financial vehicles through anime. And as a result, that's why after ReZero, we started to see the sort of production and planning of a lot of shows that sort of adapted isekai, and some of them might not necessarily be very clear, for instance. So Isekai Smartphone and Death March, for instance, are two particular shows that don't seem to stand out very clearly at first, but if you consider the fact that they were chart toppers on shousetsu at that specific time, it makes a lot of sense, for instance, that there would be a lot more backing behind the production of that particular kind of story. On the other hand, at the same time, isekai are oftentimes a useful way for a company to kind of get their feet into the water. For instance, Norioku, I said to make my abilities average, is one such example of where this was actually the publishers. I don't remember the exact name off the top of my head. I'm really sorry about that. But this is where an example of where the publisher is trying to get into anime production, or at the very least being production committee member. And so in this case, this is their sort of feed into the water because isekai at this moment is like the big trend. So to answer your question, Potent Sativa, SAO and ReZero, in terms of a narrative basis, didn't actually do that much for isekai, if anything at all. There are nevertheless certain stories that do make some kind of callback to SAO. The most famous, for instance, is being, or at least the most notable, for instance, is being the New Gate, which functionally ends at the end of a death game, which then turns into isekai proper. But for the most part, narrative-wise, they didn't really do anything. There were no tropes that were invented or codified or anything. They did potentially popularize specific things. For ReZero is the popularization of this belief that like isekai can become sort of like good engines of return on investments. And for SAO, in comparison, SAO itself potentially popularized publishing on shousetsu indirectly through the popularity of its anime. And so in those cases, they were influential. But these influences themselves could not be sufficiently codified into their narratives because most of the people who are getting into isekai or people who are writing isekai have already been reading what we would think to already be isekai before SAO, and the people who came after the SAO anime may have partly been influenced by SAO, but they weren't just looking at SAO. They were looking at a lot of other things that had already been out because of how shousetsu sets up its system, i.e., how it ranks everything and is determined by reviews and comments and so on and so forth. People aren't trying to just continually make their own SAO. They're trying to innovate on what's already been working at the time in that particular set of communities. So yeah, hope that answers it. If you have any questions or concerns about any other topics that you want me to rant about, let me know. I will probably only talk about things that I have some kind of interest in, so my apologies if I don't get to your topic. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Please subscribe to the second channel while I figure out production stuff.